Welcome to the Socially Unfiltered podcast,
where we'll be taking you along for our deep dives and doom scrolls through social media, entrepreneurship, and pop culture.
We're your hosts, Lex and Veronica, and together we're looking at everything through an unfiltered lens on the things that shape our everyday lives and society.
So grab a drink and get ready to explore the uncharted territories of online trends, share candid conversations, and uncover the stories behind the headlines.
This is the Socially Unfiltered podcast.
Are you feeling it now, Mr. Krabs?
Yes.
Are you feeling the client expectations, Mr. Krabs?
Always. No, actually, we have great clients right now.
I know. I literally can't complain about anybody.
Cannot complain about our clients right now. You know what I always thought was weird is that people actively social media managers will be posting about their clients and talking trash about them. I always thought that was weird.
So weird.
I'm like, I don't know. Or just I don't know, not posting all this stuff when you have work to do for them. We've talked about that too. I don't know. It's just weird to me.
I know, if somebody's waiting for something from you and you're posting that you're out doing, I'm like, you're so weird. At least keep it secret that you're not doing the work you're supposed to be doing for them.
I know. Crazy.
But I also think even when people don't name them by name, I still think that's weird. To be talking badly about a client experience that you actively work with, I think is so strange.
Yeah. I don't know. I just feel weird about talking about that anyway.
Same.
But do you, I guess.
Very weird. But yeah, do you, girl? Pop off, I guess.
Yep. Well, today we'll be chatting about client expectations, and this is mostly pertaining to social media managers, but I guess it can really pertain to any entrepreneur working with clients on a one-to-one basis, or even as a team working with clients, just all things expectations, because I feel like there is always that line that gets crossed often with expectations. So I'll just be chatting today about what expectations are, how we set them, how we incorporate boundaries in our business, and so much more about working with clients, because it's difficult. It takes a special person to be able to set these boundaries and stick to them and have a professional relationship without being overly professional, I guess.
Yes.
So let's get into it.
Let's get it. So when it comes to client expectations, I think the first thing that's most important is establishing them before you start working with somebody. I mean, like we said a ton in the last episode, there are things that pop up that you just don't know until they happen. But I think this is really important for the welcome guide that you're using with your client. You can use that welcome guide, just lay everything out there. These are the times that I answer. These are the times that I am technically in office. You can use the beginning of your client service provider relationship to establish all of that, because it's harder to stop something that somebody is already doing than to stop them from doing it in the first place. If you answer a couple text messages at 10 p.m. in the beginning, they might think that in the future that's just a given and that's a normal. And again, nothing wrong with doing that if that works for you. But I think it's important in your, for whatever you call it, welcome guide, to really explain all of the expectations about working with you. I think the expectations really are important when it comes to the actual content and work that you'll be doing, not just the times they're allowed to reach out to you or the times they can expect an answer. So yeah, I definitely recommend starting with that welcome guide that just lays it all out there. That way you can always be in the beginning, we established our working hours are 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. or whatever. So you can expect an answer then, because it's a lot harder, again, once it's already been happening, to be oh, by the way, I'm changing my office hours.
Yeah. And a lot of the time I notice people don't really look at welcome guides. So it might be helpful to even go through it with them. In your first initial call together, if you send them the welcome guide and then a proposal, whatever, they sign the contract, it's also important to get on a phone call with them to, first of all, go over everything you're planning to do with them. But I think also to discuss the welcome guide and go through it with them, like even like as a presentation, being like, okay, these are the working hours, this is when you can contact me, this is how many revisions that you're able to ask of me before I charge X amount for the next revision. These are the deliverables that we're going to have every single month. This is the number of content shoots we're going to have every single month. This is how long I'm going to be at content shoots every single month. Like, I think verbally speaking it too is important, because there's been a lot of times where I do just like have just sent a welcome guide or like a contract, and people sign it, but then they forget what's in the contract or they forget what's in the welcome guide. And it can be awkward to remind them of those things. But again, if you're keeping that professional level with them where you're not texting at 10 p.m., like it's not your bestie, like this, you have to separate the personal and the business. Because even for me, like I've become friends with a lot of my clients, and
Mhm.
at one point, like I did do a lot of free things for a client, and I did things very last minute. If they needed like a graphic made for a store opening like that day, I would make it and like rush around to like be able to
Mhm.
accommodate them. And then once I started setting like the boundaries again, it kind of got dicey, because they were like, "Why all of a sudden are you saying no to
Mhm.
everything? Why are you not doing this anymore? Like, I thought you did do this." So it just becomes really difficult if you it's like a slippery slope. Like do it one
Mhm.
time, then it's expected again. And it just like might not happen just like subconsciously for them. Like it's not even that they're trying to take advantage of you. It's just like, oh, she didn't care. Like she's willing to
Mhm.
do that. And it'll just happen again, again, and again. So in the beginning, it's like nail that down and like make sure they understand all of your expectations, delivery times, like edits, everything from the
Mhm.
beginning. Otherwise, it's going to be very high nugs. Very awkward to approach that conversation again.
Yes. Yeah, I think reiterating it to them in the beginning, especially, I think is so important because exactly like you said, there's so many people that just like skim through or like even just learning how to work with each other. There's definitely going to be times where something comes up that
Mhm.
you have to just be like, oh, like I don't do that. And
Yeah.
exactly like you said, if you get somebody used to it, when you stop doing it, it's like, oh, well, you had no problem doing it last time. Like,
Yeah.
or if you're ever like, "Oh, I can do that. It takes literally 5 minutes." The next time you're like, "Oh, I can't fit that into our package this month." And they're
Mhm.
like, "Well, you said it takes 5 minutes." Like it's
Yeah.
and it's something that could take 5 minutes or it's something that could take an hour. And either way, if it's not in your expectations when you first start, it's not fair for them to expect it of
Mhm.
you ever. And yeah, I've definitely gotten myself into some dicey territory in that sense, just doing so much more than what was ever outlined in a package. And I learned, you know, I
Mhm.
don't, I can't even say I learned quickly because it wasn't a quick
No.
experience. It was
Same.
a
It was
long,
years.
yes, it was literally years of
Uh-huh.
me being like, oh yeah, no problem. And then all of a sudden when it was like, well, hey, like, do you want to rework like our, package or anything? It was like, well, no, you've been doing all of this. Like, why would it need to be in the package now? And it can make for some very awkward conversations. And yeah, it's just
Mhm.
always better to establish it in the beginning. And I mean, basically everything that you kind of listed off quickly, we can go into more depth about like your boundaries, what your deliverables are, response time, stuff like that. And we could even just talk about some of the things that we say if it helps you to kind of word things
Mhm.
in your agreement or different boundaries and expectations to help you set for your client. Not so much like what are they, like I think we're all pretty familiar with what it means to like have an expectation on deliverables. Obviously
Mhm.
it means that you're delivering a certain amount of pieces of content as a social media manager, like response time. We can just kind of tell you a little bit about what we put in ours so that they all make sense. Some of the boundaries, I mean, I know we just very quickly touched on all of this, but when it comes to your boundaries with a client, I think your communication is going to be one of the most important things that you can establish the boundary with, just so that they aren't expecting the late night answers or expecting an email to be responded to right away. I think just that communication, I mean, even if you're somebody who I know people use like Slack for their client communication, or they, won't text with their clients and only communicate via email. That's totally up to you. And it's whatever works best for you. I know for me, I have my work phone. So they do get access to texting me on my work phone, but it's not my personal cell phone number. exactly like you said, though, I have kind of become friends with everybody that I'm pretty sure everybody that I work with has my personal phone number, and they
Yes.
don't abuse that privilege, so they're allowed to
Yeah.
have it. But I've
You
definitely
have
worked.
to be, like, particular with who you're
Yeah,
giving. It's
like
not like a new client we don't know and we're giving our number out, like,
yeah, no.
that leaves for a lot of room for them to contact you outside of your
Mhm.
office hours, but
Yeah.
yeah, be, like, very particular about who you're giving your number to.
Yes. Very I mean, even in your personal life, to give people fake
Yeah,
phone numbers, who cares?
honestly. Yeah.
But yeah, like communication, boundaries, obviously. And I mean, even your working hours, like in my agreements, I don't remember it word for word, but it's like, I will always respond to you within 24 hours. And the reason that I word it that way is because, like, if I'm at a shoot that, like, say somebody texts me at noon and I'm at a shoot that I don't get done with until 6 o'clock that night, I will answer you tomorrow morning. Like it just, if it's not something that's like urgent or pressing, if I'm not like clocking back in when I'm done with that shoot for the day and I'm just like clocking out for the day, like we can pick back up on this tomorrow. So it's just so people don't like immediately expect a response. Also has taken a long time to like build up to that because with everybody that I work with right now and anybody in the future, we aren't really doing anything like last minute. Like there's nothing
Yeah.
that anybody could need from me like immediately
Mhm.
because we do like such a long approval process and yeah, there's just not really much room for people to need things like right away. So,
Mhm.
I just always establish 24 hours. It's not usually 24 hours, like it's usually that same day. There's not really ever a ton of cases where I'm not responding to somebody for 24 hours, but I put that in there just so that if it
Yeah,
does ever
gotcha.
need to be addressed, yeah, it can be addressed. And the
Yeah.
way that you communicate with them obviously is going to be up to you too. So,
Yeah. I had, like, an experience with a past client where we did become, like, friends and would chat about, like, other things aside from just working together, and that became tricky too because if we were, like, texting at night about something completely, like, different, like, not about work, and then
mhm.
work would get brought up on their end, like, how do you not answer that? So that's where it
Right.
becomes difficult if you, like, become friendly with your client or, like,
For sure.
you hang out or, like, do anything with them. It's, like, really hard to establish those boundaries too of, like, we're talking about something completely different and then you bring up work or, like, "Oh, can you work on this on the website?" Or, like, "What did
Yeah.
you get this done?" And it's kinda like, "Well, how do I not answer you now? Like, how do I ignore you at this point?
Right.
I was just responding to you." So it has
Mhm.
to be, like, a line where I had to say, like, "Hey, I don't work past 5 o'clock. Like, I know that we're just chatting about other things, but, like, I'm not, like, adjusting anything or fixing anything until tomorrow morning. Like, I can
Yeah.
definitely work on that for you, but just so you know, like, moving forward, if you need anything done, like, please let me know before 5 o'clock." And that's just,
Mhm.
like, a boundary, and if they don't respect it, they don't respect it, but most of the time, they understand, and they're like, "Oh my god, like, I'm so sorry. I
Mhm.
forgot," or, like, it does genuinely slip people's minds sometimes, like, what time it is, especially if they're the ones
For sure.
working, like, say, like, they're working 9 to 5, and when can they contact you if they're just working the whole
Mhm.
time? So sometimes, like, you can tweak your office hours to what works for you and the client, because
Yep.
I don't think it should only be about, like, what works for you, like, I think it has to be flexible with your clients as well,
Mhm.
like, if they are on a different time zone, like, I know one of my clients or 2 of my clients were 3 hours behind, so I would
Mhm.
realize, like, okay, my 5 o'clock is their 3 o'clock or
Right. You're like, "I can't be
2 o'clock.
2 o'clock." Yeah. You're like,
Yeah.
"I can't be tapping out on you midday." Yeah.
Yeah, and, like, even posting time for them, like, I'm not posting for them at 9 AM, I'm gonna post for them later on in the day because
Mhm.
they're 3 hours behind, so that wouldn't make sense. So I just think it's just making those tweaks as well to what works for both of you.
'Cause
But
I also tell people too, I'm like, "You can text or, like, email me literally triple, quadruple, text me, I don't care. Like, send me whatever you want, like, at whatever time you want because I just live on do not disturb, so it doesn't bother me." But I'm like, a lot of my people know, well, I mean, not a lot of them, all of them know that they probably won't get a response right away if it's something to do with work at 10 p.m., but
Mhm.
I'm like, you're free to send it. Like, who am I to say, like, oh, you can't be having like this incredible idea right now. Like, save it for tomorrow morning. Like, no, just send it. And like, I'll respond when I
Mhm.
respond. So, yeah, I definitely don't like tell people, like, oh, you're not allowed to talk to me during these times. Like, I'm like, literally say and send me whatever you want, whenever you want. But they
Mhm.
know, she just won't be like working on this or exactly like you said, like, one of my clients, the past few weeks has just had a lot of things that are happening after work hours because that's when she has time to work on it. And I'm like, I'll respond like because I'm still, sitting here, but it's not like I'm answering her and like pulling up the page and like doing it and then answering it. Like I'm not doing that. And they know that.
Yeah.
But I'm like, I'm so down to like jam with you on this idea that you're having right now. Like it's who am I to say you're not allowed to come up with your next best thing just
Right.
because after my office hours. So I'm like, literally send whatever you want, whenever you want, and when you'll get a response about it
Yeah.
specifically. So,
Exactly. I just think it's like making those boundaries for yourself right in the beginning. Like if something is out of line, like just mention it or say it. Like if they want an extra post, be like, totally, like that's not included in our package, but I'm happy to add it if you
yeah.
like. And then most of the time, like they'll be like, oh yeah, just feel free to add it. But I have
Mhm.
had like that one client be like, oh, never mind. Like, never mind. Like, I don't want that then.
Yeah.
Because they realize you're not just gonna do something for free. I
Mhm.
mean, this is the perfect example of going to, like, Starbucks or Dunkin' Donuts or wherever you go and get your coffee. You're not gonna get a second coffee for free. Like, you
Yeah.
don't go into a coffee shop expecting, like, "I'm gonna get 2 coffees, but only pay for 1 because 'cause they're
Mhm.
just gonna be nice enough to throw in the extra." Like,
Mhm.
it doesn't work that way. You're performing a service. You are
Mhm.
needing to be paid for that service. So just make
Mhm.
sure that you are setting those boundaries. And also, like, I think goes to say, like, there's going to be a lot of respect if you are sticking to your packages and your deliverables, like,
Mhm.
because they see that that is exactly what they're getting. It's what your services are worth. I think if you're constantly throwing in free stuff, if you're giving discounts, if you're just doing things like that all the time, they don't really see your worth anymore and they're not going to respect your time
Mhm.
or like what you're charging because they're like, "Oh, she
Mhm.
can always just do this. She's always throwing in free stuff. She's always giving
Right.
discounts." Like it just goes to show about yourself as a business owner, I think. So, just
Mhm.
make sure you're sticking to what you preach
Yes.
on that.
Yeah, and something that was said to me, like, this was a long time ago, like, back in my fitness days, it was, obviously a very different context, but it's the statement of under promise, over deliver, and I love that. Like, I not that you necessarily need to be, under promising in the way where it's making your work not sound like it's gonna be as great as it's going to be, and it doesn't need to be over delivering, like, in the way of like you're giving them free stuff. Like the best way I can kind of relate it to like what we do is kind of what we talked about in the last episode. If somebody does a one-off content shoot with me, I tell them like I'll have this content back to you within a week. But then on my end, I'm actually giving myself a deadline of like 3 to 5 days. So
Mhm.
that way it's getting back to them before that week is up, and to them
Yeah.
they're like, "Oh my god, she was early." But to
Mhm.
me, it's just what is fitting. But I know like if something were to happen, I do have up until that
Yeah.
week. You know what I mean? And like same thing with like even just deliverables or content, there's been a ton of times where I always catch myself like wanting to say,
I'll
like,
see you tomorrow.
yes, yes. Oh yeah, we'll get that done tomorrow. Like
Oh, yeah, we've all done it. We've all
yeah,
and
there's
there's been times
definitely
where we, like, have
yeah. Oh,
given it
for
to
sure.
them
There's
the next
yeah.
day, or there's been times where we haven't, and they don't say
Mhm.
anything, but it's like, yeah, you're like, "Oh, shit, I gotta catch myself," like, as much as you wanna sound like, "I'll get this to you right away," and, like, be so
Yes.
quick with it, like, take your
Yeah.
time.
Mhm. And, like, even with, like, actual content, like, saying let's say you're doing a one-off content shoot and you're like, "Oh, I can for sure get, 12 posts, like, done for you." And then, like, I catch myself wanting to be like, "But I'll totally do some extra, like, if we have extra content left over." But, like, instead of over-promising that and then the time
Mhm,
comes and I'm editing and I'm like, "Fuck, I don't feel like doing 2 extra reels for them." Like, I would rather say
mhm.
like, "Okay, I can do 12 posts for you," and then when it comes time to deliver, be like, oh, we had so much left over, like I just threw in an extra one. You know what I mean? Like
Mhm.
under promising and over delivering, I think is what it's
Yes.
obviously better than over promising and under delivering, because that is
100%. Nobody
obviously where
wants
the
that.
issue comes. Yeah, and I don't mean that like in any type of way that like you have to be over delivering, but it's little things like exactly like you said, like, oh, can we get this posted today? And it's like, well, I don't know if I can do it today, but I can definitely do it, in the next 2 or 3 days. And then let's say you had some time pop up today and you do it quick and you're like, oh, I actually had some time pop up today. Like I was able to just get it done. Like there's
Yeah.
ways to like lightly let them know what to expect. And then obviously if it's better than that, that's great. But at least like what
Yeah.
expectation you set already. But that phrase
Mhm.
has just like always stuck with me, like under promise, over deliver. And again, it doesn't need to be over delivering in the way that you're like giving a bunch of free shit or doing a bunch of extra
Right.
work for free. Like, because it's the difference too of like the experience somebody has, like with even with the shoot that I did last week, like I did end up editing some stuff for her, even though, she paid for a certain amount. And I definitely did an extra one because I was like, I didn't know she was going to have 3 different products. I thought it was only 2. So, like, in the agreement I made with her, it was like, okay, we'll do one of the event and one for each of your products. And then I started doing it and I was like, how do I choose like 2 of the 3 products? So I'm like, whatever, I'm just going to do the third one. And I sent it to her and she was like, oh my God, like I wasn't expecting this. Like, this is so great. You have no idea how helpful this is. That's a way
Mhm.
different like reaction than being like, "Oh, I know we only planned for 2, but like, do you think you could just throw in this third?" Like she didn't ask me for that. She didn't like
Yeah.
imply that it was like that's what we agreed to. So it's just yeah, it doesn't always need to be over delivering in like a crazy way.
Yeah. I agree. Because then it gets you like that extra client. I was just talking to Jill at SL Sprays, and she was like, so much of the time where like somebody say like they have an event and their tan comes off or something, or like it's been a week and they have like a special event leading up and they don't want to get a whole new spray. She's like, I will give them a free like touch up. Like she's like, come
Mhm.
in, I'll get you a free touch up. And then I gained that client forever because I
Yeah.
did that. I went the extra mile. And there's such a difference between like constantly doing free stuff and like being
Mhm.
taken advantage of and the client expecting things of you and you're doing free things all the time, between that and like just going the extra mile sometimes to like show
Mhm.
appreciation that like, hey, you got me this gig of like doing this content shoot for you. I've never worked with you before. Like, I want to make
Mhm.
a good impression. I want to
Yes.
throw in an extra goodie. I want to go the extra mile, just show you that like I actually genuinely care. And
Mhm.
I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Some might argue that you shouldn't do any work that's unpaid, and that's their MO, and that's fine. But I just
That's
think
fine.
for us, like, we have done that. We still do that for clients. And even on
Mhm.
like 1 year anniversaries, like you can do something extra for them as like an
Mhm.
appreciation or like a thank you or like a gift card. Just little things that show your clients like you are still human and you're not a
Mhm.
robot that just is only like operating based on the
Right.
hours worked or whatever. Like, I just
Right.
think it's such a nice thing to do sometimes, to
Mhm.
throw that extra little thing in, and it just makes them so happy and they are
Yep.
appreciative. But it depends, like, again, who you're working with and like
Mhm.
making sure they do respect you back.
Yeah, because there's a huge difference between everything that we just said and the people who are intentionally just trying to get you to do things. Like a lot of the time what happens to social media managers is I think are mistaken as like digital jacks of all trades, and like
Yeah.
a lot of people have, the knowledge to build a course online or to sell digital products, stuff like that, but I think a lot of the times just because we work in the online space, it's like we not even like are expected to. I think people just think that it's like all the same, especially when they're not super familiar with the industry. Like, hey, can you help me rewrite this part of my website? And it's like, no, I can help you write an
Yeah.
Instagram caption, like,
Right.
stuff like that. And I mean, there's obviously, if it's something that you enjoy, then obviously you can include those things in your package. You can obviously come up with different packages that include those services in them, but I think a lot of the time, like a lot of the conception comes from the fact that people think just because we work online and on social media that we know
Mhm.
everything there is to know about the digital space. Like, oh, can you just
Yeah.
throw up an ad for me quick? And it's like,
Yeah, my website, Google
yeah.
Ads, like, and there
Mhm.
were times where we both were doing things like that. Like, we
Oh,
were
for
saying yes
sure.
to absolutely everything because we're like, "Oh, okay, they expect this, they want this, like, we may as well
Yep.
do it and make extra money." But when you're not, like, loving what you're doing or, like, that's not
Mhm.
in your contract with them, like, I was just undercharging, I was doing everything, and then by the time you get, like, more clients, you can't even take on more clients because 'cause you're doing all these extra things for
Right.
this one client that you don't even wanna be doing.
Mhm.
Just gets so dicey with that stuff,
Mhm.
like, only do things that you're contracted to do or, like, that you love to do. Like, if you love doing ads and you're good at it, go for it, offer that, but
Mhm.
I just will never offer that again.
Yeah, no, I won't either. And it's hard too because, like, I mean, we've both been there where you have to have the conversation like, this isn't technically included in our package, but like I'd love to add it on for you for this amount, or like we could adjust our package to be this. And I can't remember if it was this episode or the last one that I said, like, I think it was the last one because we were talking about content shoots. I had a client where, like, if their shoot was really far that month, like, they would let me do one less post because that 1 hour that I spent less on their post that month was going
Mhm.
towards my travel time for their shoot. So it was a very, like, give and take. And again, it wasn't her, like, expecting that. It was more so this is just what works for both of us.
Mhm. I just think it is gonna all come down to trial and error and, like, actually going through these things because it's easy to be like, "I'm gonna have these boundaries, no one's gonna
Mhm.
cross them." Like, we all have that mindset, like, I never thought I would go through half the stuff that I did with past clients or, like, have to
Mhm.
set these boundaries and have to be so professional, but you do. It's like you can be really, really good at your job, but at the end of the day, you still also have to handle the back end, the
Mhm.
conversations, like, remaining a professional and setting those boundaries for yourself as a business owner because it can lead to burnout like we just talked about our
Mhm.
past like 2 episodes ago we talked about burnout and it will lead to that if you're always saying yes to things and you
Mhm.
know stretching yourself too thin where you can't you're over promising you can't deliver on those promises because
Mhm.
you've just said yes to too many things that you genuinely can't commit to.
Yes. Yeah, and you made a great point too that, like, at some point you start doing so much extra for people that it's stopping you from bringing on
Yes.
other clients that could be paying for those spots. And it's
Mhm.
very tough. But yeah, we've been there and we've had to have the conversations, and it is hard to be like, "Hey, could you pay me more money than what you already pay me?" Like, it is tough, but at the end of the day,
Mhm.
also you are a service provider. We've been there. We've both been there. I mean, not even that long ago. And
Oh,
it's definitely not the easiest conversation to have, but it does get easier, I think, like over time, because I also think you eventually get to a place where it's like, okay, like even if they say no, like, okay, I'm just going to go find another client to take that spot then.
right.
Like if they say like, no, we don't want to add anything extra on, like, yeah, it stays awkward for you a little bit because you're like, well, I know that you need this, but like I'm not
Mhm.
just going to do it for you.
Yeah.
Um
That's the
yeah, it's
worst part when
tricky.
you, like, wanna do so much more and you wanna make it better, but
Mhm.
the budget doesn't allow for it or, like, they don't
Yep.
wanna do it, and it's, like, so frustrating because 'cause you're like, "Oh, I just wanna, like, do this," and sometimes I do. I'm like, "I'm just gonna do this extra post because I really wanna get this out because I'm so proud of it
Mhm.
and it's so good."
Yep.
But, like, I do have to stop myself too because that can turn into more and more, and it snowballs, and
Mhm.
but yeah, even like expectations with non-local clients, I think like
Mm.
at first I started as only working with local clients, so I was
Mhm.
always doing the content shoots myself and like we talked about this in the last episode about content shoots. It is like a whole different ballgame having clients that aren't local that you don't do content shoots for because
Mhm.
setting the expectations of like when they're going to be uploading content for you, how they're going to be filming content, when they upload like their deliverables as well
Mhm.
are important. It's not just on you anymore. And it's just so difficult relying on other people for content because
Mhm.
most of the time, like we said in the last episode, they aren't supplying the content in time or like, and it just sets you back so much. Like, I stopped working with this client recently, but for weeks I just didn't have content. And it was like the constant conversation of like, hey,
Hey.
still need content. Hey, we're missing 6 reels. Hey, we're missing content for this
Mhm.
month. Like, do you want me to replace it with something else? So it was just like the
Mhm.
repetitive reminders and like it's tough. It's really tough. And at one point you kind of just have to be like, is this worth it? Because you both
Mhm.
have to be in it. Like you both have to be willing to collaborate and work together on all of the deliverables. Like I can't be successful if you're not helping me make you successful.
Mhm.
Like you have a say and you have a part in the content too. And that
Yes.
was really tough for me.
Yeah, it's definitely not the easiest thing to like emphasize to your clients, but I think
Mhm.
it definitely helps like setting that expectation in the beginning. And I mean, like we said in this episode or the last episode, you obviously don't know until something happens. Like you could go into a package with somebody and they're like, I'm going to get you all the content by this day and like send me everything that you need by this
Mhm.
day. And like you'll 100% have it all. And obviously sometimes that doesn't happen. So I know like for both of us, or at least I know for sure for my own agreements, like I am putting in there, it's obviously hard because you're starting at different times with different people and you're doing different things for them. But for a lot of my clients, like in our agreement, it says like that I basically, again, I don't remember like word for word what this says, but it's, I operate on like a 2 week schedule. So our content is made for 2 weeks at a time.
Mhm.
I need everything from you by this Monday and I'll have everything to you by the next Monday and it all needs to be approved by Friday because then it starts posting the Monday after that. This all like there's like calendared like bi-weekly blah 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 second Monday before like stuff like that. Like it literally is in there just being like you will supply me with content for this time period by this day
Yeah.
and that just like recurs throughout our time of working together. And yeah, there's just a lot of expectations around that too. And just, not only when your client can expect your end of the bargain, but also
Yeah.
when you'll be receiving what you need from them to make your
Mhm.
job happen.
Yeah, because even if it's not like the shoots or
Mhm.
like uploading content for you, it can be your monthly calls. It can be getting on that
Mhm.
call and talking about analytics. It can be answering your questions for like frequently
Mhm.
asked questions, or if you're the one that's managing like their DMs or their comments, and there's going to be
Mhm.
things that come up that you can't answer. So I think even things like that are in my contract as well. Like, if I
Mhm.
need you, like, you will be available to answer
Yes.
questions. Like, it also has to go both ways. It's not all just on you and like your time. Like, it has to be
Mhm.
them agreeing to these terms as well. Like, they have to be on a monthly call with you. They have to answer
Mhm.
questions for you. They have to be willing to shoot content for you every single month. Like, there it's a lot of commitment, and I think a lot of people think that when they get a social media manager, they're like, "Okay, hands off, like, I don't have to do anything," and that's so
Yeah.
far from the truth. Like, you are still the brand, like, you are your brand, and you have to be
Mhm.
present in it, and you have to be willing to work with your social media manager to make them successful, to help them. Like,
Mhm.
you cannot be hands off. So before you hire a social media manager, make sure that you have that time to be able to put into helping them help you.
Mhm.
And I always say that because everyone jumps on a call and they're like, I can't wait to like have all this time back and like be completely hands off. And I'm like, no, 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 you're going to get a lot of time back, but you will never, ever be fully hands off unless I'm the one
Mhm.
that is the business owner. Like,
Right.
you can never be completely hands off. And
Mhm.
sorry, that's just how it is.
Yeah. Yeah, that's why I mean, kind of off topic, but, like, that's even how I've become, like like, an indicator of if I wanna work with somebody or not is if I see them, like, actively posting on social media as it is,
Yeah.
because then I know that they know everything that goes into it, and it's not so much me having to reiterate to them, like, "Oh, you have to, like, show up for content each week," or, like, "Every month we have to have a shoot," because
Mhm.
they have never done that before. And that's not to say there's anything wrong with people. Like, it's obviously just a time thing sometimes, or like they just don't even know how to work Instagram. Like, obviously, there's
Yeah.
reasons that they wouldn't actively be posting, but something that really attracts me to a potential client is when they're actively already posting for
Yes.
themselves, even if it's not like consistent or anything. But
Mhm.
because then at least you know, or they know, like I love picking up on somebody's content and like they're like, I want this to just look like I made it. And I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, perfect. Even if they don't have you continue the type of content that they were making, at least they know what they do and don't like. Like
Yeah.
it might be a little bit better on like your collaborative end when you go in and they're like, okay, like I've been making content like this, but I really like content like this. Like it'll just help you kind of navigate the content that you will be making for them if
Mhm.
they've already been doing some themselves. But yeah, I love when people are like, I just don't even want to like change anything, like just pick up on what I've been doing. I'm like, perfect, because you just took out like
Mhm.
90% of the guesswork for me. So
Exactly. I hate when it feels like you're pulling teeth to get content, because
mhm,
at that point, it's not gonna be enjoyable for anyone. It won't be
mhm,
enjoyable for them or for you, and you're not gonna get the content that you want, and people can read into that, like, into the energy that you put
for
into your
sure.
content, and, like, it's yeah, I think just being selective with who you take on, which might be hard when you're a beginner because you obviously wanna say yes to everything and everyone, but at the end of the
Mhm,
day, like, you'd rather have somebody that is very willing to work with you and, like, collaborate with you and sees it as a collaboration instead of just, like, everything falling on you, and then in the
mhm,
end, like, you're gonna stop working with them anyway because 'cause you're not gonna get the content that you need or,
mhm,
like, not gonna have the communication that you need. Like, with
mhm.
this one client I had, like, literally, I would go they would ghost for, like, a month, and I'd be like, "Where's the content? Where's the content?" And it just, like, sucks always having to be the
Chase
reminder
them.
and, like, chasing them and being like, "Where's the content?" And, like,
Mhm,
you're trying your hardest, and it's not being reciprocated, and unfortunately, that's just how it ends because it doesn't end up working out when they are
mhm,
not putting in the effort as well. Like, they have to care just
mhm,
as much about making this work as you,
mhm. Yep.
and when you care more than them, I just think it's tough.
Yeah, it definitely is. And I mean, I think about the days when I can have somebody that is easy as just being like, "Here's 55 videos I recorded today, like,
Literally.
do
And it's
something with them."
crazy because it's the easiest part,
I
like,
know, it's
it is.
literally
We always say this, we're like, "If we could just record a bunch of content, because we
Yeah,
do. It's the
yeah,
editing
it
part
just
and the
sits there.
posting that's, like, the most difficult, so that's the craziest part to me is I'm like, "I would just prop your freaking tripod up and record absolutely everything you do,
Mhm.
and then just send it off and not have to worry about, like, editing
Yep,
it." Are you kidding? That's the easiest part.
yep.
But,
And if you're listening to that wondering, "Oh, well, then why don't you guys just do that now?" We do. We just don't edit the content and it doesn't leave our phones. Like,
yeah,
the amount of shit I have
there's
filmed on
so
my phone,
much.
yeah, it just sits. I'm like, I literally wanna, like, add somebody to my iCloud and just be like, "Just go through my camera roll and, like, make content with it." Like, I don't even care what
Honestly.
it is.
I think maybe sometimes there's also an expectation when you get hired or like you start not get hired, when you start working with a client that you're now like a W-2 employee or that you're their employee, and that's
Mm,
not the case. Like, I think sometimes there's that disconnect or like that expectation, I guess maybe
mhm.
we could call it, that like, okay, you're a part of the team. You have to like join our monthly calls as a team. And
Oh,
sometimes
yeah.
that can be appropriate, but there's a lot of time where it's like the meetings they have that you don't really even need to be a part of. It's about
Mhm.
their business and
Yep.
nothing to do with social media. And we've both experienced that. And there
Mhm.
just is that expectation sometimes that like you're on this team, you're staying till the routine's clean. Like
Yeah.
it's not like that. You are a freelancer, you're a contractor,
Mhm.
you work for yourself, and you are solely there to do their social media unless otherwise said or paid for. But yeah, I
Mhm.
just think sometimes there are those expectations to like go to events or like go to their meetings or just other things that are expected that aren't necessarily in your package or you're being paid for. And it's up to you to obviously set those boundaries and what you want to do. Like, if you do want to go to these events, if you do want to go to their meetings, like make sure you're
Mhm.
being compensated so you're not like having that built up frustration because that can happen too.
Yes. Going back really quick to communication, this just popped in my head. Something else that I don't think a lot of people think about, and it certainly was not something that I thought about until it started happening to me, is figuring out who you're actually communicating with. Let's say you work for somebody and they have 10 employees that work like in their store. are you then responsible for communicating with all 10 of those employees to like get
Mm,
content from this person and get content from that person? Or are you
yes.
going to like set the expectation that like you don't even communicate with any of those 10 employees? You only speak with the owner or manager, whoever, like a designated point of contact, because then it's not just you chasing one person for content, it's you chasing multiple people for content. Or like if you're trying to schedule a shoot and you're asking, okay, well, what's your availability? Okay, well, what's your availability? Like you
Right.
need to kind of explain to them that it's not very time efficient for you to communicate with that many people. And then
Mhm.
something else is going back to like your onboarding and your timelines and stuff, because I think there's a lot of, at least I know for myself, like I've talked to a lot of people and like we'll start working together and they're like, okay, so we start posting next week. And it's like, well, no, I
Mhm.
work on your strategy this week. And then we're going to do a shoot next week. And then the week after that, I'm going to edit and revise everything. And then the week after that, we'll start posting. So I think setting that like timeline expectation with somebody in the beginning
Yes.
of when the posting will actually start, because as excited about the entire process as a lot of people are or will be, they're worried about when you're going to start posting. So I think it's very important to
Mhm.
go into it just really reiterating to them that like, hey,
Yeah.
active posting doesn't start for a few weeks. And I also like will outline it. I'll be like, okay, like here's our onboarding meeting. Like this is what we're going to cover. It's on this date. And then for the few days after that, I'm going to be working on your strategy. And then for the next few days, like we'll have another meeting and like revise everything. And then we do our shoot and then we start posting. Like I
Yeah.
literally give like that full outline.
Mhm. Yeah.
Those were two
And
things that I forgot about.
And if you want to see all of these or you want the outline, it's all in our social media manager business blueprint, which is linked under this episode. So
Mhm.
if you're struggling with all of these things, like setting your business up and working with
Mhm.
clients and expectations, like that is there for you. But I completely agree. Like, especially with the communication piece, like I remember I was working with this salon and one of the like managers there all of a sudden started communicating with me instead of the owner
Yeah.
who I was like answering to and who was paying me. And I was just hearing different things from like the manager versus the owner. And the
Mhm.
like manager would be telling me what to post and throwing last minute things. And like she would go in there and post like randomly or scattered and then
Yeah.
like just like completely taking over and micromanaging me and then like sitting me down for meetings when I was in there for a content shoot. Like
Yeah,
it
weird.
was just very, like, hostile and weird, and at one point, I just went to the owner and I was like, "Listen, I work with you, and, like,
Yeah.
I only need to be
Mhm.
communicating with one person because this is
Mhm.
not how I run my business, and I'm not reporting to her." So, it's
Mhm.
just yeah, setting that up for sure, being like, "Who am I reporting to?" And, like, "Who am I communicating with? Who's
Mhm.
approving this stuff?"
Yep.
And just making that clear because it can get very challenging. I
Yeah.
agree with, like, setting everything up too, like, when you're going in for the content shoot, how long it's gonna take for strategy, like, when you're
Mhm.
doing your monthly calls, like, I definitely recommend scheduling your, like, monthly call for months in advance, so then you know every single month you have that call with them,
Yep.
things like that, so instead of just, like, constantly reaching out, "When are you available? When are you free? When can we do a call?" Like, set all those
Mhm.
things up for them and for yourself
Yep.
ahead of time.
Yeah. Great tips.
The tea.
The tea is spilled.
I feel like we covered everything on expectations, and
Mhm.
again, all of this stuff is also included in the blueprint if you're looking to begin your journey as a social media manager, or if you're just looking to tweak a couple things or add things into your business that you may not have thought of, things that have popped up.
Yep.
We have a 25-day guide on all of this.
Yes, ma'am. And Blueprint will cover 99% of that because it's definitely something that we both took a while to fully implement and even still
Mhm.
struggle with sometimes. Just I'm a retired people pleaser, so it's like in my nature to just say yes, that's no problem.
Yeah,
Veronica's taught me how to say no a lot, so
you and Gabby, like one thing in life.
so thank you for
Lots of
that.
people say no.
Let us know if we missed anything, if you have anything that you want to add, and we'll meet you back here next Monday. Thanks for hanging.
Thanks for hanging with us. Bye.
See you next week. Bye.
Thanks for hanging. If you aren't sick of us yet, jump over to the Socially Unfiltered Pod Instagram.
Check out the Social Media Manager Blueprint.
And everything else you'll need can be found in the show notes.
And we'll see you next Monday.